Chapter 3159. With the increase in difficulty of the bridge of life and death, Jianshan's injuries naturally became even more severe. The half of his body that had been burned by the laws of fire had not just been reduced to charcoal. This was because even if he had been reduced to charcoal, it still meant that his body still existed. His body still existed. However, with the increase in power of the laws of fire, his body actually shrank at a visible rate. No, it did not shrink. Instead, it dissolved, reduced to nothingness. His chaotic body, which had been specially refined by chaotic force and possessed unimaginable defenses, was actually reduced to nothingness bit by bit under the burning of the laws of fire. It was completely vaporized, where not even a speck of dust remained. The other half of his body that had been attacked by the laws of destruction suffered the same fate. The laws of destruction turned into invisible blades that could penetrate every inch of his body. Not only did they destroy every inch of Jianshan's flesh, but even his exposed white bones were reduced to nothingness by the merciless ravaging of the laws of destruction. At this moment, Jianshan seemed vicious and terrifying. Not only did he lose all his skin from the attacks of the two laws, but there was not a single piece of intact flesh on his body. Even his bones had vanished piece by piece. If it were not for the firm foundation of the chaotic body, he probably would have died long ago from such heavy injuries. 11 more steps, 11 more steps, just 11 more steps. I have to go. Jianshan lay on the ground. He no longer had the power to stand up. His powerful willpower and unyielding will seem to become the final motivation for him to continue. Soon after, pain appeared in his eyes. The extreme pain made his eyeballs seem like they were going to split apart. Not only did his eyes turn blood red in an instant, the expression in his eyes also became crazed at that moment. His soul had turned into a roaring flame at that moment. As his soul burned, invisible energy separated from the burning soul, pouring into his damaged body without holding back at all. It allowed Jianshan's damaged body to possess power once again. He used this energy to stand up again. He forcefully endured the torment of the laws of fire and the laws of destruction and began to move again. The 90th step, the 91st step, the 92nd step. This time, Jianshan used the energy he obtained from burning his soul to make it to the 95th step with great difficulty. Every single step cost him his life. Every step he took was exchanged for by the unimaginable pain he experienced. When he reached the 95th step, Jianshan was forced to stop. He remained where he was as his entire body trembled violently. This was because the damage he suffered increased with every step he took. The further he went, the more dangerous it would be. Although his soul was constantly burning, the energy he obtained from burning it at this rate was not enough for him to continue. A beast-like roar rang out from Jianshan's throat. A third of his soul had actually collapsed in a single instance. He had burned up a third of his soul in a single instance before continuing onwards with his full strength. 96 steps, 97 steps, 97 steps. He had reached Jianshan's limit again. Boom. Jianshan's head rumbled. Half of his soul collapsed again. He took the 98th step, the 99th step. However, the distance of this final step was like a natural chasm that blocked his path. This was because his soul was less than a third of what it was at its peak. He had a feeling that even if he burned the power of his soul again, he would not be able to take the final step. The difficulty of the bridge of life and death had increased. It just happened to be at his limit, blocking him from taking the final step. Crack! Suddenly, the chaotic Niden in Jianshan's dantian produced a clear sound. A crack suddenly appeared on the smooth surface of the chaotic Niden. Afterwards, the crack rapidly spread. More and more cracks appeared, and they covered the entire chaotic Niden in an instant like a spider's web. Large amounts of chaotic force surged out from the cracks. The final step. There's only one final step left. Today, I'll take the final step with the price of shattering my core. Jianshan roared inside. Madness filled his eyes. He seemed to want to take the final step at all costs. Even if he died, he would not back down. He would pay all the price just to give Fairy Haoyue a chance at survival. Suddenly, the chaotic Niden shattered. Immediately, all the chaotic force in the chaotic Niden erupted. As it damaged Jianshan's body to a certain extent, it also formed an energy barrier around Jianshan. Even though the energy barrier was condensed from chaotic force, the level of chaotic force that Jianshan grasped was still too weak. Compared to the two supreme laws that covered the bridge of life and death, it was no different from a newborn baby. As a result, the energy barrier shattered in an instant. However, that was not what Jianshan wanted. Instead, he wanted the power that his chaotic Niden would give him when it shattered. Using the shattered Niden as the price, Jianshan gritted his teeth and used all his strength to take the final step. This step meant that he could successfully pass through the bridge of life and death. This step would determine whether he could give Fairy Haoyue a chance at survival. This step would determine whether he lived or died. When he took the step, the chaotic force within him was depleted at a terrifying rate. He felt dizzy and Jianshan's vision blurred. He felt the world spin around him as he completely fainted. In the end, he did not know whether he had successfully passed through the bridge of life and death. He only knew that his final step landed on a piece of tough ground, and he could no longer hold on. His vision darkened, and he lost his final bit of consciousness. He fainted. Outside the heavenly palace of Bixing, Ming Xie and Yun Xiaoyan remained where they were. They stared at the bridge of life and death that led to the very top of the palace. Chapter 3160. Don't worry. With Jianshan's ability, he'll definitely be able to make it through the bridge of life and death, Ming Xie comforted from one side. However, even though he said that, he was not confident. This was because the difficulty of the bridge of life and death was adjusted according to one's cultivation, talent, and battle prowess. As a result, even supreme prodigies would lose all their advantages on the bridge of life and death. However, at this moment, the bridge of life and death in the air slowly vanished. Ming Xie's eyes immediately narrowed when he saw this. Afterwards, his lips curled into a smile, as if he had been relieved of a great burden. Although the bridge of life and death was enveloped by the light of the two laws, preventing others from seeing what was happening inside, Ming Xie was a veteran divine general of the heavenly palace of Bixing after all. As a result, he could tell with a single glance whether Jianshan had successfully made it through the way the bridge of life and death vanished. Jianshan has succeeded, said Ming Xie. What? He's succeeded? Then let's go tell Brother Dong. He's probably worried to death right now. A sliver of joy appeared on Yun Xiaoyan's face as well. Her heart that had been in her throat the entire time finally settled down. At the highest point of the heavenly palace of Bixing, Jianshan had lost all his consciousness and senses. He lay on the cold ground without moving at all. He just happened to be at the 100th step of the bridge of life and death. Making it through the 100th step would directly bring him to the highest point of the heavenly palace of Bixing, where he would be able to meet the supreme Unata Grand Exalt. Over the countless years, there had been a few experts who had made it through the bridge of life and met the Unata Grand Exalt. Jianshan was definitely not the first, but he was definitely the most miserable one. The majestic hall was silent. Jianshan lay there like a dead person. His breathing was weak, and his life essence was dim. His vital energies had been greatly depleted. He basically had one foot in the grave. His current fate could be said to be extremely miserable. Not to mention whether or not he could survive. Even if he did, his vitality would be damaged and there would be endless hidden dangers. Not only would his future path be blocked, even if he wanted to recover his strength, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. This was because the price he had paid was too heavy. His chaotic inner core had shattered. More than 2/3 of his primordial spirit had collapsed, and he had suffered great internal and external injuries. His foundation had been completely damaged. It could be considered a miracle that he was still alive in his current state. A ball of dense light floated in the depths of the hall, and it was surrounded by the laws of the Grand Tao. A blurry figure could be faintly seen. This person was the master of the heavenly palace of Bishing, the Anatta Grand Exalt. The Anatta Grand Exalt sat in the air without moving at all. She did not say anything, nor did she do anything. She did not respond to Jianchen, who had fainted outside the hall either. Who knew if she was ignoring him, or if she had already entered a meditative state and was unable to pay attention to the matters of the outside world. The scene seemed to become strangely frozen there. The Anatta Grand Exalt's appearance was hidden, sitting in the air indifferently while Jianchen's breathing was weak. He hovered on the boundary between life and death, lying on the cold ground without moving at all. He was unconscious. This scene lasted for 4 hours. 4 hours later, the silence was finally broken by a soft sigh. The voice carried a sense of powerlessness and helplessness. It was also at this moment that the Anatta Grand Exalt finally moved. He extended a finger, and the laws of creation immediately descended, enveloping Jianchen as a ball of dense light. At the same time, the light lifted Jianchen off the ground slowly, drifting into the hall. During this time, the laws of creation created the order of the world, using the power of the world and the power of order to create matter and energy from nothingness. This was the laws of creation that the Anatta Grand Exalt had comprehended to the limit of 100th level. It was extremely powerful, possessing supreme power that could turn the rotten into the wondrous. It could influence the order of the world and interfere with the operation of the ways. Afterwards, the laws of creation directly penetrated Jianchen's body. Immediately, Jianchen's vanished flesh and blood reappeared bit by bit under the effects of the laws of creation. He had been created from nothingness. The chaotic Niden in his dantian had already shattered. Most of the chaotic force hidden within had already been consumed when Jianchen took the 100th step. The remaining chaotic force swam through Jianchen's body aimlessly, dispersing into the surroundings bit by bit. However, at this moment, an extremely dense ball of laws of creation suddenly entered Jianchen's dantian, wrapping around all the remaining chaotic force in his body. Afterwards, countless laws evolved within the laws of creation. Countless orders were disrupted, and countless laws were rewritten. A while later, when the laws of creation vanished, a clearly shrunken chaotic Niden silently appeared in Jianchen's dantian. The Anatta Grand Exalt had forcefully created his shattered chaotic Niden by condensing all the remaining chaotic force in his body with supreme power. The laws of creation were known to be able to create everything in the world. As long as it did not exceed the level of the laws of creation, it could theoretically be created. Jianchen's chaotic body and chaotic force were theoretically the greatest powers that surpassed the 3,000 ways. Even if he had comprehended the laws of creation to the limit of 100th layer, it would be impossible for him to create such a level of power. However, the chaotic force he possessed right now was nowhere close to true chaotic force. It could only be regarded as pseudo-chaotic force. In terms of level, it was obviously far below the limit of the laws of creation. It was exactly because of this that his chaotic force and chaotic body could be created from nothingness by the Anatta Grand Exalt through the laws of creation. Very soon, the laws of creation around Jianchen vanished. Jianchen seemed like he had been reborn. His flesh and blood that had been destroyed by the laws of fire and the laws of destruction had grown back. At that moment, he seemed no different from when he was in perfect condition. Of course, this was only on the surface. In reality, his wounds had not weakened because of this. For example, there was no change in the slightest after he burned his life essence and primordial spirit. No matter how serious his injuries were before, they were still the same. It was as if the Anatta Grand Exalt had only made up for the wounds Jianchen had received from the laws of fire and the laws of destruction on the bridge of life and death. Jianchen still had to bear the burden of sacrificing his vital energies, burning his vital energies, and even collapsing his soul to make it through the bridge of life and death. Chapter 3161. Time passed silently. After who knew how long, Jianchen slowly woke up. The moment he woke up, he felt like his head was about to explode. An indescribable pain filled his head as his head ached. Over 2/3 of his soul had collapsed on the bridge of life and death. Not only was his soul heavily injured, but it had also become unprecedentedly weak. Jianchen endured the heart-wrenching pain and dizziness in his head as he slowly opened his eyes. Immediately, the majestic outline of a hall appeared before him. "This is the heavenly palace of Bishing?" Jianchen murmured. He was powerless and his voice was feeble. He tried his best to remember everything that had happened before. Vaguely, he seemed to remember that he had taken the 100th step successfully. "I should have successfully made it through the bridge of life and death," Jianchen said by himself. His voice was broken, and he needed to stop and catch his breath every time he said a few words. "No, my body." Very soon, Jianchen seemed to sense something. He suddenly looked at his body, and when he saw that his body was unscathed, his eyes immediately narrowed. He became confused and filled with disbelief. He clearly remembered that his body had been heavily injured under the combined attacks of the laws of fire and the laws of destruction. Not only was there no skin, but a large portion of his flesh and bones had vanished as well. As a matter of fact, his limbs were incomplete. However, looking at it now, his body was actually unscathed. Of course, this was only the surface of his body. His internal injuries were still a mess. It was not just his body. He immediately discovered that his chaotic Niden, which should have shattered, was actually as good as before. It was just much smaller in size, and the chaotic force was much weaker as well. The series of changes and abnormalities immediately stunned Jianchen. However, he seemed to think of something very soon. He suddenly looked towards the depths of the hall. A figure that seemed like a god immediately entered Jianchen's vision as he sat in the air and was enveloped by the light of the ways. Without thinking, Jianchen knew the identity of the person in front of him. He immediately stood up from the ground with difficulty. This movement naturally affected the injuries in his body, causing him to grit his teeth in pain. He endured the intense pain from his soul and body as he bowed deeply towards the Anata Grand Exalt. Junior Jianchen greets the Grand Exalt. However, the Anata Grand Exalt did not reply at all. Junior Jianchen greets Your Highness Grand Exalt. With no other choice, Jianchen could only bow a second time. The Anata Grand Exalt still did not respond to the second bow. Your Majesty. For a moment, Jianchen was rather at a loss. The Grand Exalt's thoughts were unfathomable. He had no idea why the Anata Grand Exalt was ignoring him. Could it be that the level he was standing on was too low and could not enter the eyes of the Grand Venerable? However, it made sense when he thought about it. With his meager strength, he was no different from an ant before the Anata Grand Exalt. Was there a need for a sovereign to pay any attention to an ant's bow? After thinking through this, Jianchen immediately stopped wasting his breath. He directly took out the crystal coffin that held Fairy Haoyue and cut straight to the chase. He said in a pleading tone, Junior has crossed the bridge of life and death to see the Grand Exalt because I have a request. I hope the Grand Exalt can save my friend. This time, the Anata Grand Exalt finally stopped remaining silent. She said in a dignified voice, On the bridge of life and death, you endured pain that only extraordinary people could endure. You experienced great challenges that extraordinary people could face. You paid a huge price, barely making it through the bridge of life and death. Are you only asking me to save this person after paying such a great price? You're absolutely right, Your Majesty. Junior went through all the trials just to save someone, Jianchen said. After a moment of silence, the Anata Grand Exalt said, You've successfully crossed the bridge of life and death, but you only have a single chance to see me. It doesn't mean I can fulfill your request. Junior naturally understands that. I just hope that the Grand Exalt can save my friend for the sake of my efforts in returning the Anata Tower. This is because she's been injured by the laws of fire from the Flame Venerable. She doesn't have much time left. Your Majesty, you're the only person who can save her, Jian Chen begged bitterly. This was the first time he had begged someone like this. However, this matter was related to Fairy Haoyue's life, so it was not up to him to decide. He had to grasp this final chance. No matter where the tower is, I can take it back with a single thought. No expert can stop me, so why do I need you to return it? The Anata Grand Exalt's cold, emotionless voice rang out. She did not give him any face at all. Jianchen was immediately speechless when he heard that. He was stunned for a moment. He knew that his contributions in returning the Anata Tower would not necessarily be recognized by the Anata Grand Exalt. After all, the contributions had been promised by the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng. However, he had never thought that after going through so much trouble and risking his life to return the Anata Tower, his actions would actually be so worthless in the eyes of the Anata Grand Exalt. Back then, he had spent so much effort and even paid with his life, yet in the end, all his efforts were laughable and childish in the eyes of the Anata Grand Exalt. Kea had even died to the hands of the Elder of Mountains and Seas. At that moment, Jianchen actually felt sorrowful. However, he had to suppress all his emotions at this moment. He bowed deeply towards the Anata Grand Exalt again and pleaded, Junior is willing to use a rare treasure in exchange for a chance for the Grand Exalt to take action. Now that things had developed like this, Jianchen had no other choice. He was already prepared to take out the Fortune Jade. Fortune Jade was extremely rare, and it possessed the ability to block all senses. Only the naked eye could discover it. As a result, he believed that even with the Anata Grand Exalt's heaven-defying ability to see through all lies, she would not know that he possessed a treasure like the Fortune Jade. Apart from the Fruit of Ways and chaotic ancient Qi from the chaotic space, there are no other treasures in the world that can catch my attention. Even if you can take out a complete Supreme God artifact, I still won't take it seriously because I have no use for Supreme God artifacts that don't suit me. Both the Fruit of Ways and chaotic ancient Qi are items that have surpassed God-tier materials. Do you have the Fruit of Ways and chaotic ancient Qi on you? The Anata Grand Exalt's words were like a bucket of cold water that splashed Jianchen's heart. It immediately chilled him. Chapter 3162. Your Majesty Grand Exalt, please save my friend. I can't give you the Chaos Dao Fruit and Chaos Palea Qi you need right now, but I'll definitely find them and offer them to you in the future. Jianchen pleaded once more. He had only managed to meet the Anata Grand Exalt after so much difficulty, so he was unwilling to give up on this chance of survival so easily. The ignorant really are fearless. You're not even a chaotic prime, yet you're bold enough to boast about finding the Fruit of Chaos and chaotic ancient Qi. Do you know where you need to go to find the Fruit of Chaos and chaotic ancient Qi? Both the Fruit of Chaos and chaotic ancient Qi exist in the chaotic space outside the world. The chaotic space is extremely dangerous. Only those who have grasped a complete way or possessed a sovereign god artifact have the right to set foot in there. This is because you need to be at the level of sovereigns at the very least to move through the chaotic space. Otherwise, you won't have the right to set foot in there even if you're a 9th heavenly layer Grand Prime. Moreover, even if you do have the ability to set foot in there, you might not necessarily be able to find the Fruit of Chaos and chaotic ancient Qi. Even I need to rely on luck to find these two items of chaos. It's common for me to return empty-handed, said the Anata Grand Exalt. I know that the Fruit of Chaos and chaotic ancient Qi are difficult to find, but as long as you're willing to assist me, I'll definitely be able to find them in the future no matter how rare they are. Jianchen gritted his teeth. Naturally, he also realized that he seemed rather shameless right now, but he really had no other way to save Fairy Haoyue. In the future? You might not even be able to live until then, the Anata Grand Exalt said softly. Jianshan's presence immediately collapsed when he heard that. He thought about what the sword spirits had said to him in the past. They said that he was an existence that was not permitted by the world, that he was a forbidden existence. He would probably be killed by the world in the end. Although he did not know the exact reason, he knew that it would not end well. The Anata Grand Exalt's words just happened to touch Jianshan's heart, making him think about his future. He didn't necessarily have the qualifications to reach the apex, nor did he necessarily have the life to live until then. Even so, he was still hoping to find the Chaos Dao fruit and primal Chaos Paleo energy in the future. Now that he thought about the fate that he might face in the future, Jianshan suddenly felt a sense of ridicule. He did not even have a future himself, yet he was trying to repay the Anata Grand Exalt's kindness in the future. Was that not a joke? The only thing he was uncertain about was when the calamity that the sword spirits spoke of would descend. Your Highness Grand Exalt, are you really unwilling to save my friend? Jianshan asked with a final glimmer of hope. No. The Anata Grand Exalt's voice rang out without any hesitation. It was cold and emotionless. Jianshan's body shook violently as if he had been struck by lightning. Immediately, he felt like all his thoughts had fallen silent. A deep sense of powerlessness appeared in his heart. Even his hollow eyes were filled with despair. Without a doubt, the Anata Grand Exalt's short but firm reply was a death sentence for Fairy Haoyue. This was because he was the only existence in the saint's world who had surpassed the flame reverend in terms of the laws of fire. He was also the only sovereign Jianshan knew who was completely confident in saving Fairy Haoyue. Jianshan stood up shakily. He placed his hands on the crystal coffin and stabilized himself with great difficulty. He looked at Fairy Haoyue, who lay inside silently as sorrow filled his eyes. In the past, Fairy Haoyue had saved him from danger time and time again. She had resolved many problems for him. Now, she faced life-threatening danger, but he was powerless. All he could do was watch as Fairy Haoyue walked towards death step by step. Jianshan felt like his heart was being stabbed by a blade. You're very sad? Very sad as well? The Anata Grand Exalt's voice rang out slowly. It was impossible to tell what she was feeling. Jianshan was completely submerged in the extreme sorrow and despair from losing Fairy Haoyue. He was in no mood to pay attention to the Anata Grand Exalt's words. The Anata Grand Exalt did not become angered by Jianshan's silence and indifference. Instead, she continued to ask, "Is this person really that important to you?" Jianshan stared at Fairy Haoyue's beautiful face in a daze. He subconsciously replied, "She saved my life many times in the past. Without her, I wouldn't be who I am right now. I owe her far, far too much in my life. It's just a pity that I no longer have the chance to repay her. You care about her so much. In order to save her, you even risked your own life to attempt the bridge of life and death. You're paying such a great price just because she saved your life in the past?" The Anata Grand Exalt continued to ask. "Fairy Haoyue saving my life is only one of the reasons. Aside from that, she's also the most important friend in my life," Jianshan murmured. Afterwards, he moved very slowly, carrying the crystal coffin on his shoulder with great difficulty. He was ready to leave. At this moment, a small tower appeared before the Anata Grand Exalt. It was only the size of a fist and shone with golden light. It was extremely dazzling. This was the Anata Tower that Jianshan had carried with him for a very long time in the past. However, compared to the past, the Anata Tower had changed drastically. Firstly, all the damaged parts had been repaired, and the sword slashes that covered it had all been erased. In the past, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt had used his supreme sword chi to leave behind many seals on the Anata Tower in order to seal it. Now, all the seals had been destroyed. I saw an obsession left behind by a person on this pagoda. That person had also perished in order to save you, As soon as the Anata Grand Exalt said that, Jian Chun immediately froze. His expression changed rapidly before becoming filled with deep pain in the end. The Anata Grand Exalt's words immediately made him think of Kea. He had met Kea by chance in a lower world. Afterwards, Kea was heavily injured and fell into a deep coma. In order to save Kea, he could only take the unconscious Kea through the tunnel between the two worlds and leave the Tianyuan family, appearing in the new and unfamiliar world of the Saint's world. Chapter 3163. For this, he called Su Ran and asked the experts of the Myriad Bone Guild to destroy the Gloomwater sect. However, even though the Gloomwater sect was destroyed, Kea would never return. Kea's death had always been the deepest pain in Jianchun's heart. It was his greatest regret. Grand Exalt, you've suddenly mentioned Kea. May I ask if you have a way to revive Kea? Jianchun probed. Although he knew that Kea's soul had already been wiped out, he knew that the Grand Exalt of the heavens was still a supreme being. However, the person in front of him was, after all, a supreme being of heaven and earth who had transformed into the heavenly Tao. He had extraordinary means and might have some method. Although his main objective this time was to save Fairy Haoyue, he would not give up on the slightest chance of reviving Kea. I possess the laws of creation, so I can create everything. If I'm willing, I can indeed use a sliver of consciousness, a few imprints, or even a sliver of information to recreate all the people who should have passed away, said the Anata Grand Exalt. Jianchun suddenly became excited. His gloomy eyes lit up at that moment. Afterwards, he seemed to think of something, and he became extremely uneasy. He asked nervously and uneasily, "May I ask if the condition for reviving Kea requires the fruit of chaos and chaotic paleochi? Your soul is tainted with a sliver of chaotic force, which is rather strange. If you have to give up half of your soul in exchange for a chance at reviving her, would you be willing?" I'm willing. As long as the Grand Exalt can revive Kea, I'm willing even if I have to give up 90% of my soul. Jianchun immediately became excited. He agreed without any hesitation. He could tell that the Anata Grand Exalt was clearly interested in his soul. A portion of your soul has already split off, so it's incomplete. If you split off another half of your soul in this state, it will lead to irreversible and severe consequences. It might even sever your path towards the Tao in the future, Jianchun said with a smile. You need to consider this carefully. Are you really willing to destroy your future in exchange for a dead person? I'm willing. As long as the Grand Exalt is willing to help me, I'm willing to give up half of my soul right now, Jianchun said firmly. The Anata Grand Exalt said nothing. She seemed to fall into a short period of silence. However, her silence made Jianchun's heart pounded. He waited below anxiously with mixed feelings. However, he still felt like he was dreaming in the depths of his head. He had come to see the Anata Grand Exalt this time to save Fairy Haoyue, but he had never expected that he would suddenly gain a sliver of hope of reviving Kea. As a result, Jianchun felt extremely excited, but at the same time, he felt extremely mixed emotions. Although I can use some imprints and obsessions to create some fallen people using the art of creation, the created person is no longer the original person. At most, it can only be considered as a memory carrier with obsessions and imprints as the core. Since some matters and items have already passed away, let's just follow nature and let them pass away forever. The Anata Grand Exalt sighed gently and continued, Jianchun, since you're so loyal, I'll help you this time. Leave the woman beside you here. You can go. When he heard that, Jianchun immediately became worried. He clasped his fist in a hurry and said, Thank you for your assistance, Grand Exalt. However, I do have a request. I'm willing to give up half of my soul in hopes that the Grand Exalt can revive Kea through the laws of creation. Even if she's no longer the same person after she's revived, I'm still willing. Since she's already passed away, why force it? You can go. The Anata Grand Exalt's voice rang out. With that, Jianshan immediately felt the scenery around him change. He had been sent out of the heavenly palace of Bishing by an invisible force. He appeared outside the heavenly palace of Bishing, where he stood at the very beginning of the bridge of life and death. Fairy Haoyue's crystal coffin was left behind on the highest floor of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Jianshan had basically fulfilled his wish in this trip to the heavenly palace of Bishing. He had successfully saved Fairy Haoyue's life. However, Jianshan was not satisfied. He completely ignored his wounds and the tearing pain from his soul. He stood up as if he had used all his strength and made his way back to the heavenly palace of Bishing with heavy steps. He pleaded loudly, "Grand Exalt, I'm willing to give up half of my soul in hopes that you can revive Kea. If half of my soul isn't enough, I'm willing to give up 9 layers of my soul or even all of it. I only hope that it'll be enough to revive Kea." Jianshan dragged his heavily injured body towards the heavenly palace of Bishing step by step. He wanted to enter and see the Anata Grand Exalt again. However, when he approached a certain distance from the heavenly palace of Bishing, he was stopped by an invisible power. The power was so great that even when he was at his peak condition, he would not be able to break through it, let alone when he was heavily injured. This was because the power originated from the heavenly palace of Bishing. It was the terrifying power of a sovereign god artifact. "Grand Exalt, as long as you can revive Kea, I'm willing to pay any price. I only hope that she can be revived, even if she's no longer the original her and is only a vessel for my obsession and imprint, I'm still willing," Jianshan pleaded bitterly outside. His eyes were filled with hope and desire. During this time, Kea's figure appeared in his head again and again, causing his heart to ache. It also made him even more determined to revive Kea. "Brother, you've finally come out. But what's wrong with you?" At this moment, Ming Dong ran out from the heavenly palace of Bishing. When he heard Jianshan mention Kea's name, he immediately became doubtful. He was confused. Didn't Jianshan come specially to save Fairy Haoyue? Why did he mention another person's name in the blink of an eye? Your master can revive Kea. He can revive Kea. He can revive Kea," Jianshan said in a hurry. His eyes burned with the flames of hope as his heart could not help but beat heavily. He had obtained hope of reviving Kea from the Anata Grand Exalt. This sliver of hope was like a spark on the plains, burning brighter and brighter. It was like a prairie fire, filling his entire soul. "What? Master can do something like that?" Ming Dong was surprised. "I'll go beg Master right now. I hope Master can revive Kea for my sake." With that, Ming Dong turned around and ran into the heavenly palace of Bishing. However, he returned very soon. He said to Jianshan regretfully, "Brother, Master said that if you really want to revive the dead, you can do it yourself once you comprehend the 100th layer of the laws of creation to the limit. No. Your master is clearly interested in my soul. I'm willing to sacrifice my soul for a chance at reviving Kea. I don't care if my path is obstructed, and I don't care if I'm left with a legacy. As long as Kea can be revived, I'm willing to pay any price." Jianshan begged. Kea had died to save him. For him, Kea had even given up his life without any hesitation, so what was there that he would not give up? The Anata Grand Exalt remained seated at the highest point of the heavenly palace of Bishing. He did not move at all like a meditating monk. With his level of cultivation, he could see through the entire saint's world with a single thought. How could he not know about what was happening outside the heavenly palace of Bishing? He let out a long sigh and did not respond to Jianshan's begging. Instead, he controlled the crystal coffin where Fairy Haoyue resided to float closer. Silently, the crystal coffin that was forged from precious materials and covered with powerful formations suddenly shattered. Afterwards, all the fragments vanished into thin air. An invisible and terrifying power had obliterated them to the point where they did not even leave behind a speck of dust. They had directly evaporated into thin air. Fairy Haoyue hovered steadily in the air under the support of the invisible power. Back then, before my reincarnation was awakened, I had also received your favor. In return, I will bestow upon you a fortuitous encounter, said the Anata Grand Exalt. Afterwards, he did not do anything, but the sliver of power from the laws of fire that had taken root in Fairy Haoyue's soul and rendered Mo Tianyun and the Rain Abbess helpless drifted out by itself. The flame seemed weak, but it contained extremely great power of laws. The laws it involved were so great that it was enough to make the expressions of many grand primes in the saints' world change. This was because the laws of fire here came from a ninth heavenly layer grand prime. However, such a powerful strand of the laws of fire was removed from Fairy Haoyue's soul effortlessly before the Anata Grand Exalt. Afterwards, it was slowly extinguished, dispersing into thin air. From the beginning to the end, the Anata Grand Exalt did not even move a finger. It was as if he had completely nullified Fairy Haoyue's crisis with just a thought. Hall Spirit, send her to her origins, the Anata Grand Exalt said coldly. Chapter 3164. The white-robed celestial sword saint currently sat on the very top of the Sword God Mountains. His eyes were closed, and he stood like a rock. He did not move at all, as if he had entered a state of nothingness. Only a gentle breeze would blow past from time to time, making a few strands of his silver hair flutter in the wind. It made him seem even more otherworldly. At this moment, the celestial sword saint seemed to sense something. He slowly opened his eyes, and he directly looked beyond the desolate plain into the depths of outer space with his calm yet ancient gaze. Before long, two figures appeared silently in the vast sea of stars where the celestial sword saint was looking. They had concealed their presences, so they did not reveal anything. They hurried through the sea of stars with unbelievable speed. Even a casual step would allow them to cross an entire sea of stars. Before long, the two figures arrived outside the desolate plain. Without any hesitation, they took a step and appeared outside the Sword God Mountains like they had teleported. Only now did the two figures become visible. To no surprise, they were the great elder of the heavenly demon religion, Mo Tianyun, and the leader of the heavenly demon religion, Ning Shuang. Celestial Sword Saint, long time no see. How have you been? Mo Tianyun clasped his fist at the air as he stood outside the Sword God Mountains. He smiled faintly, but his gaze pierced through the mountains and looked at the old figure sitting on the very top. It's not your first time here. Come up and rest for a while. The celestial sword saint's voice rang out from the top of the Sword God Mountains. It was extremely indifferent. Mo Tianyun gently wrapped an arm around Ning Shuang's waist. He took a step and immediately appeared beside the celestial sword saint as if he had teleported. Come, let's play a game of chess with the old man. The celestial sword saint waved his hand and a chessboard immediately appeared, appearing between him and Mo Tianyun. Whether it was the chessboard or the chess pieces, they were all condensed from extremely pure sword qi. They contained world-shaking power. If one's cultivation did not reach a certain level, they would not even have the right to touch the chessboard or the chess pieces. Otherwise, they would be injured. Mo Tianyun laughed aloud and sat down before the celestial sword saint. He formally entered the chessboard and began an intense battle with the celestial sword saint. You don't come without a reason. Empyrean Demon Lord, tell me why you've come to find old man this time, the celestial sword saint said nonchalantly as he stared at the chessboard. As expected, I can't hide it from the sword saint. With a faint smile on his face, Mo Tianyun calmly said, This time, I came all the way here to disturb Sword Saint because I have something to ask of you. I hope that Sword Saint can bestow upon me a sword imprint. The primordial spirit of this lady beside you already has 2 imprints of the great Tao that you left behind. They are the Tao of slaughter and the Tao of life and death. Do you want to leave behind another imprint of the great Tao in her soul? The Celestial Sword Saint asked. You're absolutely right, Sword Saint. The Celestial Sword Saint continued. In her current special state, it's possible to imprint the imprint of the great Tao into her soul in the most perfect way possible, causing some changes to her soul. She'll be able to develop a sense of affinity with some of the corresponding ways, which will allow her to comprehend the corresponding laws more efficiently after she reconstructs her body. However, you shouldn't bite off more than you can chew. Comprehending too many laws will slow down your cultivation progress. That's not necessarily a good thing. Moreover, there's a limit to how many imprints of the great Tao her soul can hold. Once there are too many imprints of the great Tao, it'll only do more harm than good. I obviously understand that. If you want to store imprints of the great Tao in your soul and use the imprints to change your soul slightly, you need to fulfill some extremely harsh conditions. It just happens that Ning Shuang fulfills all of these harsh conditions. Since that's the case, how can I let Ning Shuang miss out on such a rare opportunity? I've already planned out the imprints of the great Tao Ning Shuang's soul. Apart from the ways that Ning Shuang took in the beginning, there's also the Tao of slaughter, the Tao of life and death, the Tao of the sword, and the Tao of forging. Although some of these ways aren't known to be the ways with the greatest offensive power, they're things that Ning Shuang cannot lack on her path of cultivation. They'll assist her greatly. Mo Tianyun sighed with some pity when he reached there. He said, It's a pity that there's a limit to how many imprints of the great Tao Ning Shuang's soul can hold. Otherwise, I really would want to imprint the imprints of the Tao of formations and the Tao of pills into her soul before she reconstructs her body. Since you insist, I, old man, will do as you wish. The Celestial Sword Saint said nothing more. With a flick of his finger, an imprint of the way of the sword immediately entered Ning Shuang's soul. Ning Shuang's soul shone brightly. As soon as the imprint of the way entered her soul, it rapidly dispersed, completely fusing with her soul. However, although the two had fused together, it did not mean that Ning Shuang had completely comprehended the laws of the sword. It only caused some changes to her soul, gaining some new attributes, allowing her to become closer to the laws of the sword. It would be much easier for her to comprehend the laws of the sword in the future. This method was very difficult to replicate because there were a few extremely harsh prerequisites to achieve something like Ning Shuang's. Thank you, Sword Saint. Mo Tianyun clasped his fist. The game just happened to end now. He was slightly better than the Celestial Sword Saint, but he did not care about the outcome of the game at all. He immediately stood up and bid farewell. Empyrean Demon Lord. The Celestial Sword Saint suddenly called out to Mo Tianyun. He said calmly, Seeing how we've known each other for so many years, old man will give you a piece of advice. It's best if you don't come into contact with Jianshan. Mo Tianyun paused. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the Celestial Sword Saint. May I ask why you say that? Old man knows that there's probably some connection between you and Jianshan. However, Jianshan is facing a crisis of life and death. Before he overcomes this crisis, it's best if you don't come into contact with him, or you'll probably be doomed as well, said the Celestial Sword Saint. What kind of life and death calamity would cause even me to be consigned to eternal damnation? I really want to see it. Mo Tianyun's mouth revealed a cold smile. He did not take it to heart. Empyrean Demon Lord, old man knows that you're very powerful, but you really can't help Jianshan with his crisis. Once you're sucked into it, not only will you be doomed, but even the lady beside you who you've only managed to save after paying such a huge price will die because of you, said the Celestial Sword Saint. Mo Tianyun became rather stern. He asked in doubt, Celestial Sword Saint, is Jianshan's crisis really so terrifying? How can I help him get through that life and death crisis? The crisis will only be more terrifying than you can imagine. At the very least, No one in the 6 worlds can help him overcome it. As for whether he can overcome it or not, it'll be up to his own fortune. No external force can influence that, said the celestial sword saint mysteriously. What if he doesn't overcome it? Emo Tianyun asked. Obviously, his soul will be destroyed, and he'll disperse from the world. Emo Tianyun's expression changed. Afterwards, he said nothing more. He clasped his fist at the celestial sword saint before leaving with Ning Shuang. Chapter 3165. In the Violet Wind Empire of the Southern region, there's an expert hiding in the royal capital. With your ability, it'll be very easy for you to find him if you pay attention. He just happens to need a droplet of essence blood. It's rather difficult for other people to collect the essence blood. The process is rather detrimental to the harmony of the world. However, your Empyrean demon cult has been engaged in endless slaughter in the saints' world in the past few years, so the essence blood of all races might be rather difficult for others, but it's not difficult for the Empyrean demon cult. With a droplet of essence blood, you'll be able to achieve your wish. In the vast starry sky outside the desolate plain, Emo Tianyun, who was about to enter the sea of stars, suddenly paused. His gaze suddenly focused on the southern region of the desolate plain, the Violet Wind Empire, one of the 5 everlasting empires. Thank you. Emo Tianyun clasped his fist at the celestial sword saint as he stood in outer space. In the next moment, he had already appeared in the Violet Wind Empire. Remember, don't let him notice the old man. He doesn't want his peaceful days to be disturbed, the celestial sword saint's voice rang out. He communicated with Emo Tianyun secretly from afar. Lastly, it's best if you take the girl beside you to the Radiant Saint Hall after she obtains all the imprints of ways. The power of the Radiant Saint Hall possesses a certain purification ability. With the current state of the girl's soul, the Radiant Saint Force just happens to be able to purify and cleanse her. It'll make her soul even clearer. If you want to go to the Radiant Saint Hall, it's best if you rely on your relationship with Jianchen. Although he's still very weak, you have to admit that his reputation is even more important than your identity as the Empyrean Demon Lord in the Radiant Saint Hall. It should be enough for her to be personally baptized by the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance. At this moment, Emo Tianyun and Ning Shuang appeared in the prosperous royal capital of the Violet Wind Empire in the southern region of the desolate plain. They were currently strolling aimlessly through the busy streets. I can't find the expert the celestial sword saint mentioned with the senses of my soul. He must be extremely well hidden. I need to get close to him to confirm his identity. Ning Shuang, let's search here slowly. Although the imperial city is huge, I only need a few days to search through it. Emo Tianyun said. If he wanted to find this expert, his divine sense was already useless. Thus, he could only choose the stupidest, but also the simplest method, and that was to walk through every street and alley in the imperial city, leaving his footprints everywhere. Tianyun, what's the celestial sword saint's strength? Ning Shuang asked. She glanced at the countless stores on both sides of the street with interest in her eyes. The celestial sword saint's cultivation seems to have stopped at the 6th heavenly layer of Grand Prime. However, he has obtained the legacy of a sovereign, the 3-lives sword god, so his true strength is far more terrifying than it seems on the surface. Emo Tianyun said. It seemed as if he was completely obedient to the woman beside him. He patiently explained any of her doubts in detail. It could be said that he answered everything that he knew. He spoke without holding back. However, the celestial sword saint always gives me an unfathomable feeling. The feeling he gives me is like a bottomless well that I can't see through. I already had this feeling when I first came into contact with the celestial sword saint. But when I come into contact with the celestial sword saint now, I still have this feeling, Emo Tianyun said in thought. Perhaps it's because he has obtained the Grand Exalt's legacy. Unknowingly, Mo Tianyun and Ning Shuang had already arrived near a square in the imperial capital. There were many teleportation formations on the square, including teleportation formations that could cross planes, teleportation formations that could cross regions, and so on. Many of the low-level teleportation formations shone brightly. As the power of teleportation permeated the surroundings, cultivators of varying strength were sent here from various corners of the world. They seemed to be busy. Only the teleportation formation was empty. Clearly, the teleportation formation was a precious treasure of the Violet Wind Empire. Not only was it heavily guarded, but there was even an infinite prime who watched over it all year round. This was more than enough to demonstrate how much importance the Violet Wind Empire placed on the teleportation formation. At this moment, a rattan chair had been placed near the desolate teleportation formation. An old man lay on the rattan chair. His hair was a mess and his clothes were tattered. There was even a lot of dirt on them. He simply seemed like a beggar. No one would have thought that the old man was the infinite prime who had been sent by the Violet Wind Empire to watch over the teleportation formation the moment they saw him. At this moment, this old man with a sloppy appearance was lying on the rattan chair with his eyes closed, snoring loudly. There was even a clear snoring sound coming from his nose. Greetings to Senior, great elder of the heavenly demon religion. At this moment, a voice rang out. Mo Tianyun and Ning Shuang were standing 3 meters away from the sloppy old man. At the same time, they cupped their fists and bowed towards the sloppy old man who seemed to have fallen asleep. The old man did not respond at all. His snores were deafening as he slept. Greetings to Senior, great elder of the heavenly demon religion. Mo Tianyun clasped his fist again. There were many soldiers standing guard nearby, but none of them seemed to notice Mo Tianyun at all. They glanced through the crowd with sharp gazes. In the eyes of the soldiers and even the eyes of all the cultivators on the streets, Mo Tianyun and Ning Shuang seemed transparent. Junior has an item in his hand. Perhaps it is what Senior needs. Mo Tianyun's expression was normal as he spoke in a flat tone. At this moment, the sloppy old man who was snoring on the rattan chair seemed to be disturbed. He lazily turned over and waved his hand impatiently. He mumbled, "Where did this fly come from? Go away, don't disturb this old man's sleep. I need to use the teleportation formation to find those guards. Don't disturb this old man, he's sleeping soundly. Junior has a droplet of essence blood from 10,000 races." Mo Tianyun flipped his hand and a multicolored liquid immediately appeared out of thin air. This was a droplet of essence blood that had been condensed to a high degree. Due to the fact that there were just too many races involved, the color of the droplet seemed to be all-encompassing. However, when this drop of blood essence appeared, the slovenly old man who was sleeping soundly a moment ago instantly shuddered, and he flipped over and stood up from the rattan chair. His aged eyes erupted with bright lights, and he didn't seem to be sleepy in the slightest. The essence blood of 10,000 races. You actually have the essence blood of 10,000 races. TSK, it's not easy to refine something like that. It'll take a lot of effort and it'll go against the natural order as well. Tell me, what do you want from me? The unkempt old man stared at the droplet of essence blood. Chapter 3166. All Heaven. The unkempt old man's gaze became mixed when he heard the Saint Lord of all Heaven. He sighed gently. That old man is lucky. He's already taken that step. Now, let's not talk about him. Let's not talk about him. Tell me, what do you want from old man with this droplet of essence blood? I want a droplet of essence blood in exchange for Senior's imprint of the ways of forging artifacts, said Mo Tianyun. It's that simple? The unkempt old man was slightly surprised. He glanced past Ning Shuang before nodding in understanding. All right, deal. With a flick of his finger, an imprint of the ways of forging artifacts was immediately sent into Ning Shuang's body. The droplet of essence blood in Emo Tianyun's hands ended up in the unkempt old man's hands as well. Alright, kid, how did you know that old man needed the essence blood of the myriad races? And how did you know that old man was hiding here? The unkempt old man asked in doubt after accepting the essence blood. This junior only found out about this by coincidence. Emo Tianyun revealed a meaningful smile. Coincidence? Is that really the case? The unkempt old man was in disbelief. Afterwards, he used his fingers to divine, but he found nothing. It's up to Senior whether you believe me or not. Now that I've settled the matter, I won't disturb Senior's sleep any longer. Farewell. Go. However, don't leak the news that the old man is hiding here, or the old man won't spare you. The old man still wants to sleep for a few more years. The unkempt old man grumbled. Emo Tianyun appeared outside the Radiant Saint Hall with Ning Shuang with a flash of white light. Jianchen, Ming Dong, Yun Xiaoyan, and Ming Xie appeared in one of the interplanar teleportation formations in the southern region of the Cloud Plain. However, Jianchen was as pale as snow. He was haggard, and exhaustion filled his face. His footsteps were unsteady as he tottered. It was as if just maintaining a standing posture was extremely difficult for him right now. He had only returned to the Tianyuan family with Ming Dong's support. Jianchen did not want his friends to know about his current situation, so he did not tell anyone about his return this time apart from Su Ran and Yun Wufeng, the two chaotic primes who watched over the Tianyuan family. This was because his current condition was indeed terrible. He did not want his friends to worry about him. As a result, he chose not to reveal himself. At this moment, Jianchen sat on the ground weakly at the highest point of the water cloud hall. Ming Dong constantly took out pills from his space ring and fed them to Jianchen. Ming Dong, there's no need to feed me any more pills. They won't be of much help to me. Jianchen stopped Ming Dong. His chaotic body was still present, and his chaotic Naiden had recovered miraculously. He could recover from all his wounds in the shortest amount of time possible. However, the essence that he had lost, the essence that he had burned, and the more than 2/3 of his Yuan Shen that had disappeared were definitely not things that could be recovered by some ordinary divine pellet. His damaged vitality was fine. Although heavenly resources and pills that could replenish and recover vitality were extremely rare, he could still obtain some if he paid a certain price. The most troublesome part was the exhaustion of his soul. He had burned far too much of the power of his soul on the bridge of life and death this time, causing him irreparable injuries. It would not be easy for his soul to recover. Now, his strength had been severely affected. Jianchen took back the space ring he had placed in the water cloud hall before silently tidying up the items inside. Just in case, he basically left all the precious resources in the water cloud hall when he went to the heavenly palace of Bishing this time. He only took out an extremely small amount of resources and placed them in another space ring in case he needed them. This included the Fortune Divine Jade. Right now, Jianchen was silently going through the items in the two space rings, grouping them together again. He also took out the Fortune Jade and placed it back in its place. Jianchen felt rather emotional as he stared at the Fortune Jade that shone with 5-colored light. He had already given up on going to the heavenly palace of Bishing this time. In reality, he had already made up his mind to give up on the Fortune Jade. He planned on taking it out at the very last moment and asking the Anata Grand Exalt to save Fairy Haoyue. However, the final outcome was rather unexpected. Apart from paying a heavy price on the bridge of life and death, the Anata Grand Exalt did not seem to pay any price for saving Fairy Haoyue at all. As a result, he kept the Fortune Jade that he had originally planned on giving up. It could continue to accompany him. Suddenly, Jianchen came to a halt. He had suddenly discovered that one of the items he had placed in the space ring was missing. This item was the bead with the laws of destruction that he had obtained when he first entered the Anata Tower in the lower world. He could tell that the bead was not a lucky item long ago, so he had never used it. He had also taken the bead with him when he went to the heavenly palace of Bishing this time. But now, he suddenly discovered that the bead was gone. At this moment, 2 streaks of light shot over from afar. Clearly, the sword spirits had discovered Jianshan's return as well. They returned to Jianshan's body as 2 streaks of light. "Master, why are you so heavily injured?" As soon as they returned, the sword spirits discovered Jianshan's condition and immediately cried out. With the return of the sword spirits, Jianshan forgot about the matter of the divine destruction bead. He gave a rough description of what he had gone through on the bridge of life and death. Of course, he only described what had happened on the bridge of life and death. He did not go into detail about his conversation with the Anata Grand Exalt. After all, it was related to the Grand Exalt, so he did not dare to say too much. He was afraid that the Grand Exalt would sense it and discover the existence of the sword spirits. The sword spirits fell silent after hearing that. After quite a while, they said gloomily, "Master's wounds are indeed very difficult to recover in a short amount of time in the Saint's world. You'll need quite some time to recover. However, if you go to the Xian Wang microcosm, it shouldn't be difficult for you to recover." The Xian Wang microcosm. Jianshan's eyes lit up. It was not long before he had to go to the Xian Wang microcosm. However, due to the special laws of the Xian Wang microcosm, my strength will be greatly affected there. I might even face a situation where I can't use laws. The only thing I can rely on is my physical strength. Chapter 3167. This was because he would be entering the inner world of the Xian Wang microcosm this time. The place he had entered last time could only be regarded as the outer world of the Xian Wang microcosm. It could also be regarded as the outer region. The outer region corresponded to a lower world. It was on the same level as the Tian Yuan continent. The inner world was on an even higher level. According to the predictions of the sword spirits, the Xian Wang microcosm was of an extremely high level. It was even possible for immortal exalt-level Xian Wang beasts to appear in the inner world. Immortal exalts were equivalent to grand primes in the saint's world. If Xian Wang beasts at that level really did appear, it would mean that the inner world of the Xian Wang microcosm would be on par with the saint's world. The heavenly resources that grow in the outskirts of the Xian Wang microcosm are no longer of much use to me. Only the high-level heavenly resources in the inner world will be of help to me. There's still a year before I set off. Not only do I need to do my best to recover from my wounds during this year, but I also need to prepare a large number of containers to store the various heavenly resources. In the following time, Jian Chun remained in the water cloud hall to recuperate, silently recovering from his wounds. Before long, he had completely recovered his chaotic body. Aside from the fact that his chaotic Niden had shrunk, everything else seemed to have returned to how it was before he attempted the bridge of life and death. However, his damaged core, vital energies, and collapsed soul did not change by much. Even when he ingested the corresponding pills, the effects were almost negligible. This was because he had injured his foundation. Although regular pills and heavenly resources could bring him back from the brink of death to a certain extent, they could not repair his foundation. While Jianshan recuperated in the Water Cloud Hall, the Tianyuan family made a great purchase as well. Jianshan gave Shiyu a secret order, and she directly mobilized the power of the entire clan to purchase various precious jades from the 5 regions of the Cloud Plain, as well as some special containers specially used to store heavenly resources. All the precious jades were turned into jade boxes of various sizes before being sent to the Water Cloud Hall in the end, where they all ended up in Jianshan's hands. There were even some special jades that were priceless. Such a large purchase would naturally consume an immeasurable amount of wealth. Even if it was placed in the hands of any of the top forces on Cloud Plain, they would not necessarily be able to afford it. But now, the Tianyuan family had gathered a large amount of resources from dozens of top forces in the 100 Holy City. Therefore, such a huge expenditure was naturally easy to bear. Although it was all because of Jianshan that the Tianyuan family had benefited so much, Jianshan wouldn't hold back in front of Mingdong. Outside the heavenly palace of Bishing on the Prosper Plain, there was an inconspicuous whirlpool of energy that was hidden in outer space silently. It seemed to be hesitating. The inconspicuous cyclone had already existed there for many days. It maintained a certain distance from the heavenly palace of Bishing, as if it was trying its best to hide itself, so that no one could discover it. Suddenly, the cyclone seemed to make some sort of decision. After pausing slightly, it suddenly drifted in the direction of the heavenly palace of Bishing. In the end, it actually entered the heavenly palace of Bishing silently. Just when the cyclone vanished from the heavenly palace of Bishing, the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bishing appeared. He stared at the location where the cyclone had vanished with mixed feelings. After a long moment of silence, he sighed gently in the end. The cyclone advanced carefully through the heavenly palace of Bishing, as if it was already familiar with the layout of the place. It directly approached the highest point of the heavenly palace of Bishing without encountering any obstructions. None of the divine generals it came across discovered its existence. The Anata Grand Exalt remained where she was at the highest point of the heavenly palace of Bishing. She remained enveloped by a hazy light, giving off a sense of mystery. At this moment, the cyclone hidden in outer space slowly appeared. In the end, it condensed into the figure of a child. His body was illusionary like mist, as if he could disperse with a gust of wind. "Master!" At this moment, the child knelt on the ground politely. "You still dare to return?" The Anata Grand Exalt's cold voice rang out. The child trembled violently. His face immediately became filled with fear and panic. He could be said to be more familiar with the Anata Grand Exalt than anyone else. He could clearly sense that the Anata Grand Exalt was truly angered from that short sentence. "Master, please calm down. Master, please calm down. I was heavily injured in the past, so I've always been asleep. Only when I sensed Master's presence on the bridge of life and death did I awaken from my slumber." The child trembled as he knelt there. He explained in a hurry. You're full of nonsense." The Anata Grand Exalt snorted coldly. "Tower Spirit, you've always been by Jianshan's side, wanting to possess him when he fuses with the laws of destruction. Do you really think you can hide your plans from me? You're underestimating me far too much." Towards the end, the Anata Grand Exalt's voice became filled with a heavy killing intent. This was killing intent from a sovereign of the world. Once it appeared, the myriad laws immediately shook. The entire space at the highest point of the heavenly palace of Bishing seemed to freeze up. Everything fell silent. The fear on the child's face became even heavier. No, it's not like that. Master, you've heard of me before. Listen to me. Jianshan definitely isn't as simple as he seems on the surface. He hides a great secret. Do I need you to tell me this? Tower Spirit, you actually dared to impersonate me in the past. That's treacherous. Since you've decided to betray me, don't blame me for being merciless today." The Anata Grand Exalt slowly raised her hand and gently extended it towards the child. No, spare me, Master. Spare me, Master. I won't do it again, I won't do it again. The child begged in fear, but it was completely ineffective. In the next moment, his soul collapsed loudly, turning into the most primitive origin energy. This was a strand of the origin energy of the universe. The original form of the Tower Spirit was condensed from a strand of the origin energy of the universe. Although his original form had not dispersed and still existed, all the memories and imprints of the Tower Spirit had been completely shattered by the Anata Grand Exalt's finger. Chapter 3168. Time passed silently. In the blink of an eye, Jianshan had already spent a year on the Tianyuan continent. Only 3 months remained. Jianchen did not remain in the Water Cloud Hall for the remaining time. Instead, he gathered all the people who had come to the Saint's world with him from the Tian Yuan continent. Shangguan Mu'er Qing Yishuan, newbies, Shao Jin, Shao Ling, and so on had all gathered together. They were the only people who had come to the Saint's world from the Tian Yuan continent and remained in the Tian Yuan family. Shun Jian and Siyu cultivated beside the wind venerable. Ruijin, Honglian, and Blackfish, who had shown great kindness to Jianchen on the Tian Yuan continent, had left the Tian Yuan family long ago. Who knew where they had gone? Xiongzhong, Qing Jingyun, and so on, who had come to the Saint's world with the former Spirit King Xinjian, had left the Tianyuan family long ago as well. They had left the Cloud Plain and wandered the Saint's world alone. Kea had died many years ago, to the hands of the Elder of Mountains and Seas. Fairy Haoyue was heavily injured as well, so she remained in the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Jianchen had no idea how she was doing. As for Uncle Houston, Jianchen had learnt from Mo Tianyun that he had already been accepted as a disciple by the master of Amigami. He had been cultivating in Amigami all these years. The 5 people before him were the only people who remained by Jianchen's side. Jianchen, I won't be returning to the Tian Yuan continent. I've basically become a cripple now, so it's not suitable for me to move about outside. There's nothing for me to worry about in the lower world, so I'll just stay in the Tianyuan family and enjoy the rest of my life, Newbie said casually as he lay on the chair lazily. Jianchen nodded. He looked at Newbies and said sternly, Newbies, don't worry. I'll definitely find the Dragon God's sovereign fruit for you when I return this time. You'll recover completely. I don't plan on going back either. I have nothing to worry about in the lower world, so there's no point in me going back, Qin Yishuan said coldly. That works too. The Tian Yuan continent is lacking in resources, nowhere near the Saint's world. If you go to the Tian Yuan continent, you'll only hinder your cultivation. Jianchen looked at Qin Yishuan and felt gratified. He said, Qin Yishuan, you should be close to the primordial realm soon. Although Qin Yishuan had only come to the Saint's world recently, she had obtained Swordmaster Yunqi's golden core of the laws of the sword. As a result, her progress in the past few years could only be described as rapid. Her future accomplishments were limitless. Noticing Jianchen's gratified expression, Qin Yishuan immediately felt uncomfortable. She glared at Jianchen with some displeasure and snorted gently, Don't look at me like that. Don't forget that I'm several thousand years older than you. Jianchen smiled. Mu'er Shao Jin, Shao Ling, what about you? Do you plan on going down with me? Yeah, of course. Since Master and Brother Jianchen are going, Shao Ling obviously has to go as well. Brother Jianchen, you and Master are not allowed to abandon Shao Ling and leave by yourself, or Shao Ling will never talk to you again, Shao Ling said. As for Shao Jin, Jianchen did not need to ask to know the answer. The two of them seemed to have never been apart ever since they met. You don't need to ask me. I have to go back no matter what. Now that we've gained a foothold in the Saint's world, I'll bring Xiao Bao up with me this time. Shangguan Mu'er made up her mind. Jianchen, I probably can't go back to the Tian Yuan continent because I need to return to the heavenly palace of Bisheng to cultivate in seclusion in 3 days. I'll probably be in seclusion for a very long time this time. Jianchen shook his head reluctantly. I only miss one person on the Tian Yuan continent, and that's the great elder of Mercenary City, Uncle Tian. Brother, you have to bring Uncle Tian with you when you go back this time. 3 days later, the 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng, Bai Rong, personally visited the Tianyuan family and forcefully took the reluctant Ming Dong away. Ming Xie and Yun Xiaoyan left with them as well. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. When there were only 2 months left before they set off for the Tianyuan continent, Mo Tianyun returned to the Tianyuan family with Ning Shuang. Mo Tianyun frowned as soon as he saw Jianchen. Even though Jianchen tried his best to hide it, It was impossible for him to hide his weakness from an expert like Mo Tianyun. What happened? Why have you become like this? Mo Tianyun asked with a frown. In order to give Fairy Haoyue a chance at survival, I charged through the bridge of life and death, so I paid a price. What happened in the end? Fortunately, I didn't fail you. There's no need to worry about Fairy Haoyue's injuries, Jianchen smiled easily. Mo Tianyun nodded slightly. He glanced past Jianchen with a sharp gaze as if he wanted to see through Jianchen completely. Your soul is too heavily injured, so it'll probably affect your trip to the Xianwang microcosm. After all, opening the Xianwang microcosm will require your assistance. But it's fine. The problem with your soul isn't that difficult to resolve. As Mo Tianyun said that, a pure soul immediately appeared out of nowhere. This is a pure soul refined from ether and the soul of a saint. It's also what I promised you in the past. It'll be of use to you now. Your soul is extremely heavily injured. You've injured your very foundation. There are very few heavenly resources in the world that can heal you in this state. However, a pure soul just happens to be one of those rare heavenly resources. Mo Tianyun pressed his hand against Jianchen's head gently, and the pure soul immediately fused with Jianchen's soul. At the same time, he called out, "Refine it quickly." Jianchen immediately felt a ball of extremely pure energy of the soul surge into his soul. To Jianchen's weakened soul, the injection of the pure soul was like a dried-up patty that had suddenly received a large amount of water. Not only did it recover its vitality, but it also became more and more vigorous. Jianchen closed his eyes instinctively and began to focus. He absorbed the pure soul with all his might. The pure soul turned into a ball of tremendous and pure energy that constantly fused with Jianchen's soul. Immediately, Jianchen's soul began to recover at an unbelievable rate. Moreover, the assistance the pure soul provided to Jianchen's soul was not as simple as recovery. It had reached deep into the roots of Jianchen's soul, repairing and strengthening it. After all, this was a pure soul condensed from the soul of a grand prime. Although the energy within it was nowhere near as great as when its master was alive, it was of high quality. Such a large and high-quality pure soul was naturally immeasurably beneficial to Jianchen's current soul. The energy within the pure soul was rapidly depleted, while the damaged foundation of Jianchen's soul was completely repaired in an extremely short amount of time. After the foundation was repaired, there was still a lot of energy left in the pure soul. All the remaining energy was like an ownerless ball of energy, constantly fusing with Jianchen's soul. As a result, Jianchen's soul began to strengthen at a visible rate. Very soon, his feeble soul, which had not even reached a third of its peak condition, recovered to half of its peak condition. And this did not stop. His soul continued to grow and recover, getting closer and closer to its peak condition. During this time, Mo Tianyun remained close to Jianchen. His gaze remained fixed on Jianchen as he sensed the changes to his soul and its recovery at all times. However, his brows gradually furrowed. He murmured to himself, "His soul has fused with a strand of true chaotic force, so it's different from regular cultivators. As a result, the amount of pure soul he needs to recover is much more than other cultivators. Originally, I thought that not only would a pure soul be enough to completely cure all the problems in his soul, but it would even strengthen his soul. Looks like I was too optimistic." With a flip of his hand, another pure soul appeared in Mo Tianyun's hand. It was of high quality as well. Not only was the energy within it great in quality, but the quantity was astonishing as well. It was also refined from the soul of a grand prime. I refined this pure soul from the soul of a grand prime on the ice pole plane. Although it's not as powerful as the saint of grand harmony, it's even more complete than his pure soul. "I'll give it to you today," said Jianchen. As he said that, Mo Tianyun sent the second pure soul into Jianchen's head without any hesitation. With the nourishment of the second pure soul, Jianshan's soul immediately grew rapidly. Very soon, his soul completely recovered to its peak condition. However, the energy within the pure soul was not completely depleted. After his soul recovered to its peak condition, it did not stop growing. It became more and more powerful, larger and larger. It advanced towards an even higher level of cultivation, like it was unstoppable. Suddenly, Jianshan's soul rumbled. At that moment, his soul seemed to break through some sort of shackle, suddenly undergoing a qualitative change, reaching a whole new level. Chaotic Prime. At that moment, Jianshan's soul had broken through to Chaotic Prime first. He was a first heavenly layer Chaotic Prime. However, this was still not the end. His soul continued to grow rapidly. It did not end there. Instead, as his soul broke through and strengthened, the rate at which he absorbed soul energy actually became 2 or 3 times faster than before. Boom! Suddenly, Jianshan's soul shuddered. His soul broke through once again, reaching the second heavenly layer of Chaotic Prime. It did not stop there. The energy within the pure soul was not depleted. It fused with Jianshan's soul at an even faster rate. Third heavenly layer Chaotic Prime. Fourth heavenly layer Chaotic Prime. Fifth heavenly layer Chaotic Prime.